there are so many rebel groups, militancy in Syria. Now, how will they decide who should be in power?
It's easier to displace, but it's very difficult to govern.
We can see that there are about 115 conflicts around the world. So, what are your thoughts on the world order right now? What is
Well, there is no world order. As I said in the beginning, the global governance is in crisis.
Israel has been fighting three different fronts.
Netanyahu continues to badger home that I will secure my country. But you cannot secure a country by killing so many people or bombing everywhere. You are actually creating more enemies.
Russia, Ukraine, sir, it's going to be winter time now. And what would change now after Trump coming in?
Trump is very openly saying he'll stop the war. He met Zelensky recently and he has told him again the same thing, that there should be a ceasefire.
So you recently visited Bangladesh and you met the interim leader, Mohammad Yunus. What are your take on Bangladesh situation right now?
There is no doubt there is an anti-India feeling at the grassroots level, very wrongly. So can't have India as a punching bag. We have only helped you. We want to help you.
Normal population are getting back to their normalcy, normal life.
Yeah.
Does that mean they were unhappy with Assad and
His own clan was getting richer and fatter. Anybody who was opposing is a terrorist. So he wanted to use rule by force, and there were not enough resources. Now this group, Hayat Tahrir al-Shams, which has taken over all this area with a lightning speed, which clearly shows that an unusual combination of various factors.
how did this happen? Today, we delve into the most pressing issues shaping our world today. We tackle the complex, ever-evolving conflicts around the globe, with a special focus on Syria, a region that has seen years of turmoil, geopolitical maneuvering, and human tragedy. To guide us through this intricate landscape, we are honored to have Ambassador Anil Trigunayat with us. A seasoned diplomat and a strategic thinker, Ambassador Trigunayat has represented India in key global arenas, and his insights into international conflicts and diplomacy are unparalleled. In this conversation, we discuss the ongoing situation in Syria, including the various rebel groups and the reason behind the fall of Assad's regime, the role of key global players like Russia, Turkey, America, and Israel in shaping Syria's future, the broader West Asian dynamics, including Israel's conflict on multiple fronts, and its resistance in the two-state solution, what the future holds for Ukraine, especially if Donald Trump returns to White House, and the potential endgame for the war. Ambassador Trigunayat also shares insight from his recent visit to Bangladesh and its implication for regional stability. And finally, we can explore the lessons India can draw from these conflicts to strengthen its own strategic and diplomatic stance. Ambassador Trigunayat's wealth of experience and ability to connect global events to India's interest make this an essential conversation for anyone seeking to understand the complexities of international diplomacy. So without further ado, let's get started. Before we dive into today's conversation, I want to take a quick moment and ask for a favor. We noticed that 93% of you who watch our content regularly aren't subscribed yet. My promise to you is simple. If you hit that subscribe button, we'll keep working hard to bring thought-provoking conversations, incredible guests, and the topics you really care about the most. It is practically free for you, but it makes a huge difference for us, helping us grow, reach more people, and bring even better content your way. Thank you for supporting. It means the world to us. Now let's get back to the video. Ambassador Trigunayat, welcome to Diary for Publisher. Always an honor to speak with you. We have spoken a couple of times before, mostly on the conflicts around the world. We spoke about Russia, Ukraine first, and then we spoke about the issue in West Asia. And today we are again talking about conflicts, sir. Today we can see that there are about 115 conflicts around the world. That is quite heartbreaking to hear about. And there's another one now in Syria. 2024 has been a very destructive year for all of us. So your comments on the year first, please.
Well, Shivam, at the outset, I must thank you for once again bearing with me and inviting me to this podcast. I really enjoy talking to you. That's a fact.
Likewise, sir.
Unfortunately, we talk about the conflicts because that's a bigger reality. And the conflict is not the hot conflicts. There are simmering conflicts, there are frozen conflicts. And then we see always there are 4G conflicts, as I say. While the global governance is in crisis at the moment, there is a geopolitical conflict, there's a geo-economic conflict or contestation, and there is geo-religious contestation.
That's true.
And then you have the geotechnological contestation now. So today what we see is that is in any case going around. And they are the ones which are engineering a lot of these hotspots across the world, because that's the competition. And as we are wading through the global disorder, so you are seeing more and more problems.
So just to stop you here, can you explain me these 4 different conflicts that you mentioned? Geoeconomics, geopolitical, geostrategic, and
Geo-religious.
religious, which
Yes.
is
And geo-religious has always been there, but not acknowledged. Now we have seen the Middle East, especially, let's look at it. Shia Sunni, that has been between Saudi Arabia and the other Sunni countries, and since 1979 between Iran and these countries.
Iran and Saudi.
That has played out very well in Yemen, for example, since 2015. It turned into a hot conflict, and because Iran was supporting the Houthis, and the Sunni leaders wanted to support the other regime.
True.
And we have seen that it's also a stalemate. And then you see Hamas, even though it is a Sunni group, or Hezbollah, which is more Shia group, but they are all supported by Iran for the Palestinian cause. So there it is again geo-religious and geopolitical contestation. Then there are historical injustices. For example, the Palestinians feel aggrieved. So that particular issue that has not been resolved until now has repeatedly brought about instability in the region, West Asia. And then various countries get clubbed together, and then you have the problem. Because when there was a Cold War going on, there was a balance of power. Soviet Union has its own area of influence. The Americans had their own area of influence. And at that time, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, they all were on the side of the Americans. It's only in 1979, when the Islamic Revolution began and Ayatollah Khamenei came into power, that we saw this thing getting so accentuated. And then you have this mutually assured destruction syndrome between Israel and Iran. While the Arab countries, the Sunni countries, have thought now, because of various other reasons, to somehow try to bury the differences, find a certain kind of a modus vivendi. We have seen the Saudi Arabian Iran deal that was managed by the
Chinese.
Chinese came much later.
Okay.
It started off with Iraq, with Oman, and then finally, in order to provide certain kind of a continuity and a bandwidth, I think, they approached us also. We could have done that.
True.
But then the Chinese took the cake and they started assuming it, that they have done it. But at the same time, yes, it was a good thing that got done in the region. I always believe that the regional countries and powers, including Israel, must find a modus vivendi. Otherwise, they'll continue to be the pawns in the hands of various superpowers.
The Americans, for instance.
America. So economic competition we are seeing, whether it's in the oceans, maritime domain, that's also there. Then markets, protectionism, tariff king. Trump is the tariff king, frankly. He calls India the tariff king.
Yeah.
But he loves Trump. One of my articles will be coming tomorrow on this. Then you have geotechnological contestation. And that is the real contestation between China and USA. It's not the other thing we talk of Taiwan and this and that. No. It's really the technological superiority which will dictate your place in the world going forward.
Is it going to be the chip war, sir?
Whatever. Chip war is already there. They have stopped access to the market. So the Chinese have started developing their own expertise.
And Taiwan is a hotspot.
Taiwan has been, yes. So that becomes the hotspot of that. So the contestation is that at the end of it. And then all 4 of them can get combined in particular geography. That's also quite possible.
Going back to the question, so what are your thoughts on the world order right now? What is...
Well, there is no world order. As I said in the beginning, the global governance is in crisis. The Western countries and everybody else after post-World War had agreed that there would be United Nations, which is completely defunct today. Even yesterday, the UNGA issued a declaration about asking a ceasefire in Gaza. But after 159 countries are saying that, there is nothing is happening. 4 times the United States has vetoed the Security Council resolution. The one that was even passed that was not adhered to by them. They said, no, it was not. Forced implementation will not be there. I mean, how can you do the conditional UN Security Council resolution, frankly? So we are looking at more of unilateralism that has been happening. But that era of unilateralism is also probably over. But what we are seeing today is that the complete disregard for the international law, complete defiance, not only by superpowers like Russia and US and others, but even middle powers, small powers. Africa, very small countries.
Israel.
They challenge ECOWAS. Israel is a middle power, a big power. But at the same time, this defies all international rules, regulations. You have seen the ICJ, you've seen the ICC, you've seen the UN Security Council, UNGA, the rest of the world's intent. I mean, but we are seeing the helplessness and to a great extent the impotence of the global order to enforce discipline and stop the wars. That's not happening. Because the United States also, which is the only power in the Middle East currently, is also divided in its own approach. It doesn't know whether it wants to exert itself or should it exert in the Indo-Pacific. So we'll have to see how going forward, how it goes. Coming to the conflicts, there was a 14 months, we already see the Israel-Hamas conflict. It started off with the terror attacks by Hamas and nearly 1,200 or 1,159 or whatever. Israelis were killed, 251 hostages taken. Some were released in the first few months of the ceasefire. Since then, Israel has gone ahead and did the carpet bombing, killed 44,000 people, or even if there were half of them, you can say were fighters, Hamas fighters. So it's okay. But then large number of people, it's virtually a flat place that we are looking at today. There are many reasons for doing it. Israel has its own reasons. It wants to redeem itself, and it has redeemed, in my view, in certain ways. And that was by killing all the Hezbollah leaders. It showed that it has that superiority in intelligence and the firepower, which it proved.
It did.
And which it is proving again in Syria.
Yes.
It's Golan Heights, it's a completely captured, went into the buffer zone. In this meantime, they're still bombing several places, completely decimated their navy and military installations and all, on the pretext that it should not fall in the hands of the new militia groups, which also complicates the matter. Now, Syria, I should say that, about 50 years plus, these Assads have ruled. And now the house of Assad has fallen. It could have fallen in 2011. I was in Libya at the time, after Gaddafi, and when the Americans and the Western countries had started putting in arms, ammunition, fighters into Syria, because they always believed in a regime change agenda. Change these dictators and aristocrats. That was one of the things that they did. And by doing so, they did not realize that you are unleashing these terror groups and extremist groups. This is something that was, they did not, the byproduct of it. And then we saw that what happened in Afghanistan, what happened in even in our neighborhood, in Bangladesh, we have a quick succession of these regimes which have been there for a pretty long time being removed by public discontent in the first place. And in this particular case, Syria became a major, it's firstly a very strategic place. And it was under the Iranian and Russian influence from 2015, especially for the Russians.
Who were supporting Assad, right?
They supported Assad. They came in basically, invited rather by Assad, to support him and to fight the ISIS at that time. So there was a global coalition. USA was fighting, Iran was fighting, everybody was fighting ISIS. But once again, we see that ISIS and Al-Qaeda have gaining ground in the area, in the Levant, totally. So, which is ISIL. And then once the Russians came in, the Iranians and Hezbollah fighters who operate both in Syria and Lebanon, they were supporting Assad army. So Assad was able to capture a lot of his territory back. But in the meantime, the Free Syrian Army, which the Americans had created and helped create, then there are Kurdish people in the northwest who are anti-Turkey and they want their own land and their own country or autonomous region or whatever, which Turkey does not want to give. It treats, it's called YPG and PKK, those groups, which are called as terrorist groups by Turkey. So Turkey kept on fighting with them. When Russian came in, Russia and Turkey found some accommodation. They created some kind of buffer zone. But Turkey is still his neighbor, and Turkey is hosting a very large number of Syrian refugees. You see, there are about 13 million Syrian refugees, both internally displaced and outside. I was in Jordan as ambassador, and I've seen about more than 2 million refugees are there. And they are impacting
In Turkey?
In Jordan.
In
Turkey
Jordan.
has more than 4 million, I think. Then in Lebanon, which is a very poor economy. Even there you are finding a lot of people. But what happened is that in 2015 onwards, when Russia came to help Assad did not do anything to win over the people, ordinary people, or for their plight. 90% of the Syrians are below poverty line. You can imagine that. And they have been displaced. There were no services provided. He did not do anything in that. So you lose whatever, you see, you cannot rule forever if your people are not with you. And that is what was seen now. Now this group, Hayat Tahrir al-Shams, HTS.
That's the rebel group.
That's the rebel group which has taken
marched
over.
to Damascus?
Yes, which has taken over all this area with the lightning speed. 11 days, starting from the north, Idlib, down to Aleppo, second largest city, then the third largest city, Homs, and then coming down to Damascus in 11 days without any opposition. Which clearly shows that an unusual combination of various factors.
How did this happen though?
Yes. This is number one, people were unhappy with Assad, right? They did not align with him. He was also an Alawite Shiite group.
Okay.
You know, he was not the majority Sunni in the country, but 70% people are Sunnis. And about 10% are Shiites, Alawite Shiites.
Then how was Iran supporting
Iran
Assad?
was supporting Assad.
Because
strategic reasons. Because through Iran to Syria, it goes to Iraq and to Lebanon. So it was able to carve out its own area of influence. And it was supporting its proxies, which is Hezbollah and Hamas, in their own quest, to counter Israel, basically, in that, because they have their own problem. So, number one. Number two is that all these groups have been strengthening themselves. They've been working on it. For example, STS in Idlib, where they are operating, northwest area. They are northeast. They are the ones who have their own government. Salvation government, they called it. They were making all departments, everything. So the current Prime Minister there, Bashir, has been made the interim Prime Minister of Syria in the meantime. So we are seeing that thing coming out every day, the video footages, that people are really happy. It always happens. And then second thing is why it happened is because Iran, its capacities have been diminished significantly due to the war with Israel, which is going on by Hezbollah and Hamas. Hamas has been decimated. Hezbollah is totally rudderless today. It's not.
They had a ceasefire.
But they had a ceasefire a little bit. It's holding on for a time.
I didn't understand the ceasefire. We'll get into that later, sir.
But, that means that Iran's hands, which were there, are virtually tied or cut.
So was Russia.
To a great extent. As far as Russia is concerned, is that Russia has been fighting this 2.5 year, 1,000-day now, a war in which it has lost a lot of soldiers. And Russia is a country with not too much of population. And conscription and, recruiting people and all has been a major problem also, because that creates a backlash in the country.
Okay.
And the Western countries are all this. So Russia is totally stretched.
So, what message
So Russia had a base in Syria, one naval base and one air base. So it had to withdraw its people from there and the aircrafts also to take part in Ukraine, because that's its priority.
Okay.
Yeah. So today, Assad found here nobody who could support him. And they said that your army, we can provide arms, ammunition. There are a lot of arms, but your army should fight. The army had no will to fight its own people. So army also left. So that's why this fellow had no option but to run away. And he has been given asylum in Russia.
So what message does this go to Iran's proxies that it wasn't able to help and support the partners, Assad as a partner?
Well, I think in the whole war, Iran has been the biggest loser in the Syria context. because Syria was its major partner, which was called as Axis of Resistance. And they are the ones who supported Assad. And it's only in 2023 the Arab countries also accepted Assad back into the Arab League. The Saudis, the Emiratis, they opened embassies. They wanted to help in reconstruction. So Syria, in that sense, could have done better irrespective. But the war that started off in Gaza, and which now Netanyahu claims that he was instrumental in exit of Assad, and the Americans have been, of course, wanting it since 2011. They've been working on it. Turkey wanted him gone yesterday because Turkey was against him also, because they have these Kurds and all. They wanted to find some way on the borders. So nobody wants that kind of a thing happening. And Turkey is a powerful country, a NATO country. So it continued along with the Americans. They helped them. And that's why all these people came in, and it was like pack of cards. Yes.
One thing I would also want to understand, sir, there are so many rebel groups, militancy in Syria. Now, how will they decide who should be in power?
Well, this is why. I mean, I've written about it. I say that the challenge begins now. It's easier to displace a leader, autocrat, or whoever, but it's very difficult to govern. That's the most important part, because you are not the only player there. There are so many of them, as you rightly mentioned. There is a Syrian National Army. There is a Syrian Democratic Forces. They all don't like each other. They're fighting with one another for this because of Turkish and other. You see what has happened in this country or in these countries, which are under conflict zones. It is not their own people who are fighting one another, or they are having problems with one another. They are the protégé of various external actors.
Yeah, it's all proxy.
So they are fighting on behalf of them under the garb of their own ambitions. So this is why you are not able to arrive at any solution, be it in Libya, be it in Yemen, be it anywhere else. So that's the reason, because these powers, whether they are regional powers or the big powers, they all have their own axe to grind. And so I find that now, although one must grant it that Jolani, the current leader, he has made all the right noises. But he has a history, and his fighters have a history. They were part of the ISIS, they were part of the Al-Qaeda. They have that regressive philosophy also, which at ISIS we have seen what they did. So how would they, in the new avatar, do you think that they're going to be as modern as they are sounding today? Will they continue to do so? And by doing so, are you able to keep your fighters together? Because their psyche also needs to change. It's not that regimented army that you dictate, you do this, you do that. They are people fighters all over. Secondly, the other fighter groups, how are they going to do that? Thirdly, Israel. I mean, it has taken over Golan Heights, which it won in 1967, annexed in 1981, and now it's taken the Mount Hermon and all top. So it can completely look at 360 view over Syria and Lebanon. So Israel, in that sense, temporarily is a winner. But what happens to these people? Are they going to fight against Israel, or they just want to keep everybody nibbled into their territory, and they will just stay and try to rule whatever they can get? So we have a lot to be seen. And of course, it will all depend on how the international community come to the help of these people. Because now more and more Syrians are going to come back who are staying outside the country as refugees. So they want to come back to their country. They've been waiting for it for a long time. So they will be coming from Jordan, from Syria, from Turkey, from Lebanon into Syria. That will also cause a problem of unemployment, inflation, and other things. Now, how are they going to cope up with that? So those are the problems that they are going to continue to face.
So this rebel group is called HST.
HTS.
HTS.
Yeah.
Sir,
Hayat Tahrir al-Sham.
Can we talk a little about their history? What HTS? What
Well,
made them come
HTS
in?
is actually the recent incarnation. It is Jolani himself and this group. He was part of the ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Then he broke away, didn't like that. They created a new group called Jabhat al-Nusra. Right. And then he also changed the Jabhat al-Nusra into another group. And then finally, just want to say that we have nothing to do with these two groups. He changed the name and had Tahrir al-Shams.
When was this?
And that was, I think, about 2 to 3 years ago.
2-3 years ago.
Yes.
And
this new name.
So they claim that they are, well versed to govern the
But
nation of Syria.
that area where they are, that they are governing well. Secondly, I mean, what you have to, I mean, just in this, it's just few days only, we have to be look at the statements by the leader of the group. The leader has said, told the women that you will never be forced to change your clothing or your behavior or anything. You're free to do what you want, which is a good thing compared to Taliban, let's say, or in Iran itself. So that's a thing. Secondly, what will they have any relationship with Iran? Then, if not, then Iran will continue to play spoiler. Russia would also not be happy if they have those two bases. I understand that they may have reached some understanding with the Turks. Turkey is the bigger player today, so that they will continue to retain their base. So that's a very important Mediterranean base for Russia. So that is something that will decide now. So there is still too many competing factors and too many uncertainties. Exactly, one could only wish that for the sake of these embattled Syrians, the country stabilizes. That is very important. But then how will the Americans react? They had put a $10 million bounty on this guy's head, Gilani's. And of course, they have put it now under the carpet. They are not no longer, because they've been supporting him. So that's how the Americans play these geopolitical games.
Right. So earlier you mentioned there are about 12 million refugees,
13 million.
13 million refugees across West Asia.
Not across West Asia. I mean, they're mainly
In
Turkey, Jordan, and Lebanon.
and Lebanon.
And a lot of them had gone to Western countries also.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about them? Would they want to return back to the country now?
The majority of them. Turkey has opened the main border crossing for people to return, and they're coming back. From here also now, Lebanon, because of the Israeli strikes, a large number of people came, Syrians who were there in the border areas came back here. And Jordanians also, they are very happy to go back. You see, I can tell you one instance. I was when I was in Jordan, the Canadian ambassador there organized a visit of ambassadors to a camp where they were recruiting, not recruiting, they were taking a lot of people as to Canada and try to assimilate them and this and that and all. And we went and talked to a lot of youngsters and others. You'll be surprised that a large number of them said, we don't want to go anywhere. We want to go back to our country. You see, so that's a good thing. Yeah, they don't want to uproot themselves into unknown environments. So they'll be happy there. And Syrians are very industrious people.
Sir, I was just watching the news and I got to understand that the situation in Syria, the normal population are getting back to their normalcy, normal life.
Yeah.
Does that mean they were unhappy with Assad and did they consider him as a dictator? And why, if you feel so, sir?
Well, he has been a dictator. Number one is that he was a minority, right? A leader who were ruling over the majority. So his own clan was getting richer and fatter. That everybody sees, right? He did not reach out to people. There is an opposition, whether it is a political opposition or military opposition or something, he treated them as terrorists. Anybody who was opposing as a terrorist. So he wanted to use rule by force, frankly. And there were not enough resources because the oil and gas which Syria had was controlled by the Americans in the northeast area. So, I mean, in that sense, how are you going to provide for the people also? I mean, you're dependent on the outside world. There were a large number of sanctions. There is this Caesar's Act against them, sanctions by the Americans. So they were, and then you have Israel bombing here and there all the time. So they were in a very difficult situation also. At the same time, the ruler and the government did not do anything to alleviate the suffering of the people. So people are very happy that now today somebody has come. And as I said, the initial comments, initial statements by Gilani and others are pretty good in that sense. I mean, the former prime minister has been given charge to transition properly the government institutions, no public looting and all this has been, except of course the palace of Assad. Because then people thought it was our property like everywhere else. We have seen in Sri Lanka, we have seen in Bangladesh the same thing. Yeah.
Yes, so this has become a new trend now. So ousting of political leaders.
Well, If the people, I mean, Bangladesh is no exception. There also the people were unhappy with her regime. I mean, it was very autocratic for them.
Where did Assad go now, sir?
Assad is in Russia.
In Russia.
The Russians have given them asylum. In fact, he was there a week or 10 days before also. Then he came back.
Okay.
Then he was taken there. And I mean, problem is that any leader for that matter, it's a lesson for everybody. Whether it's democratic leaders, whether it is dictators or it's autocrats or whatever combination, that unless your people are happy with you, you are sitting on a powder keg.
That's a great lesson, sir. And I'm sure a lot of people are taking notes for that.
I'm sure they should.
The political leadership. Sir, I want to connect this to Israel. Israel has been fighting 3 different fronts. Now they've included Syria as well. They did 350 bombings, like you mentioned, on all their research and development facilities, their naval forces, their military forces. How do they do all of this, sir, as a small nation?
No,
it's a powerful nation, but again,
it's a most powerful army and highly technologically savvy people.
All comes from US though.
Mainly from the United States. But on their own, I think they have done remarkably well. They are in some ways do better than the Americans, especially in intelligence. The Mossad is very well known. But the October 7, what happened was the biggest blot on their military, their intelligence, their leadership. And that was one of the reasons because of which, in my view, Netanyahu continues to badger home that I will secure my country. But you cannot secure a country by killing so many people or bombing everywhere. You are actually creating more enemies. So as an individual, you might think like that. But for the people of Israel, he has created greater insecurities in the region. So that is something, but it's a powerful, firepower is there. Americans are supporting fully. The basic fundamental of the United States foreign policy in the Middle East is security of Israel, irrespective of who comes to power. And he feels far more emboldened because of Trump now. Because Trump is fully supporting him, but Trump doesn't like wars. That's the thing.
Apparently.
Yeah, well, he says so, and he has not waged any war himself.
One thing I didn't understand was, sir, the Hamas and Israel war is a stalemate right now, if I'm not wrong.
It's a stalemate in the sense is that it's a war of unequals. But as long as the hostages are there with them, about 100 odd hostages are still with the Hamas. So you can't call it a victory, although many Israeli leaders might say that we have been victorious. Because 380 square kilometers is the total land, man. I mean, you're bombing them for now 14 months every day, in and out. You are starvation and this, that. I mean, they are documented things.
But there's no solution to it also.
Well, solution is a two-state solution.
What? No one agrees, both sides about two-state.
No, they will agree to if there is a genuine desire to agree. You see, what happens is there are formulas, there are countries. Now the Arab countries, which were normalizing ties with Israel all through Abraham Accords and all that. Today, Saudi Arabia has launched this coalition, alliance for implementation of the two-state solution. Similarly, territorial integrity and sovereignty of Syria, because they are thinking that is being very opportunistic, that is grabbing whatever it can in the Golan Heights, Israel. So it is not gaining more friends, basically. You are putting your friends, so-called friends or would-be friends, in a very, very difficult situation like that.
So what I didn't understand was, even after Israel signing a ceasefire with not Hezbollah, but Lebanon, there's still been attacks in these northern...
Well, this always happens. I mean, this is something...
So what's the point of a ceasefire then?
No, I mean, it is not an active warfare. What happens is they think that, okay, we have to... Hezbollah's hideouts are there. Hezbollah, I told one of their generals who was visiting here in India, and I told him, I said, in my view, your strategy was totally faulted vis-a-vis Hamas and Hezbollah. If after October 7th you had killed the Hamas leaders, which you did much later, if you had done it then the whole world's sympathy would still be with you, because everybody was thinking that Israel suffered from terrorism. Then it's only later on that the other countries started, okay, no, it did not start here and it started there. But at that time, everybody supported. India was firm in condemning it. Prime Minister Modi himself sent a message. But over time,
sentiment
seeing
changed.
He immediately tweeted and sent a message and assurance of our full support to the Israeli people. But nobody can justify what you've done afterwards. You see, that's the problem. You lost all sympathy, except United States. Even there are a lot of problems. I mean, Biden can even attribute some of his losses uh, to this war. And then we are looking at uh, Israeli leadership. That Prime Minister himself is facing corruption charges and all that. And as I say, that he's sitting on a lion. If he comes down, then lion will eat him up. His own system, political system. It's a divided country at the moment, and large number of people. I mean, for the first time, Hezbollah. I mean, if you have decimated completely the Hezbollah leadership, what happens is that there are these junior commanders now. There's no connection, pager and there's walkie-talkie and all that plus. So the communication network was suspended and then disrupted to a great extent. So what happens is there are these various commanders who are sitting there, junior level, and they have lots of missiles and arsenal with them. That's why they're bombing across Israel, including Netanyahu's own house. So there was some report that about 24,000 Israeli houses have been hit. So many people have been killed. They are under all the time, under the bunkers. So you have not created a security for yourself, security situation. This is the problem. And people who died, do you think their children, their grandchildren will forget?
No.
So, I mean, there has to be a different approach. What is the approach? The world says there should be two-state solution. Let there be a Palestine. Let there be on conditions can be discussed. But you must agree to discuss.
So
that's the problem.
West Asia looks like in a turmoil right now. But countries like Saudi and Turkey, what are they doing right in order to stay away from?
Turkey is not staying away.
Saudi Arabia.
But Saudi Arabia has you see, why this, in my view, this is my opinion, why Hamas did on that. You see, the Saudi Arabia was almost on the verge of normalizing ties with Israel. Normalizing, they have said it. Right. So if Saudi Arabia had normalized ties with Israel, then in the calculation of Palestinians and Hamas, the Palestinian cause is finished for good. There's no other support. Iran is support, but Iran can't do much. It's a warring nation for Israel. It can't exercise influence. Then that's the reason that today for the Palestine, Turkey also, which is looking at a geopolitical leadership in the region, took up the Palestinian cause. They called back their ambassador. They stopped this. They did not allow the Israeli president to fly over their space to join the COP29. So all those things have happened. So Saudi Arabia now has realized that you can't abdicate because the Arab street has been charged. Now everybody is talking. What happens to these people? When you are watching the television every day, then ordinary and large number of European countries have started recognizing Palestine as a state. More and more calls. Of course, I mean, what kind of a two-state solution is another question. Because see, now today, most of the settlements that Israel has on the Palestinian lands. Then they both talk about from the river to the sea, from Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea should be our land. Now both of them want the same land. So it's not an easy thing, but some solution has to be found.
Got it.
And that can only come if the Americans and other big powers are on board.
Absolutely. So from West Asia, let's shift a little bit to quick discussion on Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
Russia, Ukraine, sir, it's going to be winter time now. Before that, US had granted some attacks, which was granted to Ukraine to attack Russia. And what would change now after Trump coming in? So what are your predictions?
Well, I feel that Trump, as I said, I mean, he's a bully, but he's not a warmonger. That is something that one can adduce. Of course, when it comes to USA's security safety, every leader has to fight. But by itself, not starting a war is a very major change. But what Biden administration during this period did was authorized Ukraine to use those weapon systems to hit ATA, CMS or whatever, missiles and others to hit Russia anywhere. Now that was something a big no-no until recently. They gave them X kilometer mileage where they can hit. And Zelensky has been wanting it. But Zelensky knows very well that today the US president is a lame duck president. And you can see that most of the time it is Trump is very openly saying he'll stop the war. He has told, he met Zelensky recently in Paris.
In
Also,
France, yeah.
Yes. And he's told him again the same thing, that there should be a ceasefire. So it looks to me that some kind of a ceasefire will happen. But this will happen only after January 20th. And in the Middle East, he has also told Netanyahu to wind up his wars. And you see, so he wants before 20th that there should be some kind of a ceasefire with Hamas. That's a hope. Because both are, as far as negotiations are concerned, they have been shifting goalposts, both of them. It is not that Israel alone is doing it, it is also the Hamas which have been changing it all the time. And now they are in a weaker position, definitely. The only thing that they're holding on to are these hostages, poor hostages. We don't even know how many of them are alive. So this is the US role as it is always. And US, I tell you one thing. In my view, the US is also one of the big losers in this war which is going on in the Middle East.
I think the biggest winners are the military industrial complex of the United States. How would they react to Trump trying to wind up these wars, sir?
Trump is something that he is very much focused on today, is trying to defang the deep state. The deep state in the United States did not allow him to do anything that he wanted in the last. You see, the thing is that the US is a country of lobbies. And you rightly mentioned, military-industrial complex is very important. But the US technology itself is a very major power game, right? And technology used in, they will always have these kind of advanced weaponry for many years to come. That edge, they have it. So there will always be takers. All countries in the world have to buy those weapons and looking to buy those. Because in this particular war, what has happened is that Russia, which also is a major supplier, its credibility has been questioned in certain cases. When you continue on a war for 3-4 years like that without winning a country or something like that, you may have 120% of the territory. That's okay. But then the question is that which weapon should I buy? So that kind of a thinking would go on into this.
So quickly, last couple of questions. One is on a question based on Africa. There are some civil wars happening in Africa. Any specific ones that we should focus on in the coming podcast?
Sudan, you must talk about. South Sudan and Sudan. There is another one which is potential between Egypt and Ethiopia on the river, dispute and the Renaissance Dam. Then you have these three in sub-Saharan Africa, the Mali and the Niger and others. That's also the Congo. So in Africa, there are also quite a few hotspots that are there. Libya is nursing its wounds. It's still a divided country. So quite a few in Africa, you will have challenges. And that only Africans can deal with it.
Got it. So you recently visited Bangladesh and you met the interim leader, Mohammad Yunus. What are your take on Bangladesh situation right now? It's getting worse day by day, especially for the Hindu minority, and of course for us as well as a relationship with our neighborhood.
Well, we just had the visit of our foreign secretary to Bangladesh yesterday, and I'm sure that these issues have been talked about. See, there are two ways. One is actual relationship. The other thing is what is projected in the media. There is no doubt there is an anti-India feeling at the grassroots level, very wrongly so. And I mentioned it to the leaders there also. I say, you can't have India as a punching bag. We have only helped you. We want to help you. And if Sheikh Hasina was in power, we have to deal with her. Today you are in power, we are dealing with you. Anybody who is in power, you have to deal with them when state to state this happens. So, but whatever India has done, billions of dollars we have invested in infrastructure, providing assistance and non-reciprocal assistance is for the people of Bangladesh.
True, that's what the people
and that's what the people need to understand that. So I think that, in my view, I think that unfortunately, India was clubbed with Hasina, who did not care much about the people. And more people were distanced from her, which was visible during this. That's why you saw very quick,
Transition.
change in government there.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a very big challenge. As I said, same thing applies there also. Transition is never easy because they had no game plan.
Mm.
He has created some committees and all, which will come up with a report in January. But then if there is no political transition in time,
He's busy removing the legacy of the father of a nation, Sheikh Mujibur, but he's not focusing on the elections, for instance.
yes, that's a big complaint against him.
Mhm.
But he says that he has the Constitutional Committee, Reform Committee, and all. He has set up election committee reforms. So once their reports come, then only he'll be able to implement. But this is an internal matter.
Hmm.
We are worried because the security situation in Bangladesh has negative repercussions for us. Likewise, the minorities, the Hindu minorities, with all our neighbors, this becomes a major issue always because we also share borders with them. Bangladesh has 3 sides border with India. So, and plus India is also a Hindu majority state. So obviously the concern of the people is legitimate.
Right.
And they need to, this is their job to stop these kind of excesses against the minority communities.
Right. I want to share a perspective with you, sir. I was listening to a conversation by an ex-CIA officer, Andrew Busterman is called, and he was saying that World War III won't be like the World War I and World War II. In fact, he says that World War III is already happening,
Yes.
and it is more related to all the proxies from the external players that is the situation. And we are seeing 115 conflicts.
Yeah.
So he's saying World War III is already happening. What is your take on that?
No, I agree with you. I mean, this is true. I mean, it's not happening in the way it happened earlier when you had the groups, Axis and this, that, but it is also happening by all over, in fact, in different ways. And we know those 4Gs I mentioned to you. So the conflicts are there, and they have the potential of escalation to the nuclear ladder. That is the worst part of it. If that happens, then you are, counting our days.
What needs to happen for a nuclear war to just ignite?
Well, nuclear weapon systems or weapons were basically meant for deterrence.
Yeah.
But as the nuclear doctrines are being made more pliable and the thresholds are being reduced, the chances of escalation because of
Has gone up.
much higher today. And therefore, this can only happen if the Russians, the Americans, the Chinese, those who are the major powers,
Right.
stay within their own limits rather than crossing it all the time.
There's a doomsday clock, sir, which was started when the nuclear talks had begun, the nuclear research development, and at the moment it is the closest to 12 o'clock, which is the end game.
I hope it doesn't reach there.
It's like, I think it's 45 minutes to 12 o'clock. And it keeps changing depending on various factors and all various conflicts around the world. So last question. So all these conflicts we spoke about the one in West Asia and Eastern Europe, a little bit in Africa, Bangladesh. What is the lesson for India?
Lesson for India is that India's policy of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam is the best policy. Helping the world. Having a sane foreign policy. Talking sanity or dialogue diplomacy, the right policy we need to continue. But that policy can only be successful if we have developed a comprehensive power. That our economy continues to increase and strengthen. That our military forces, our military prowess, our technological prowess. We are way behind in technology. We need to catch up there. So then only you can say that, yes, you are a pole, you are a power, to say something that the world will listen. Today they listen to you because you're talking the right thing. They may not agree with you, or they may grudge you for certain positions they take.
Absolutely.
But they understand their implication. But you can force that also sometimes. People will understand what is there. Because it's up for grabs for everyone today. That's the problem.
Well said. So thank you so much. This has been quite insightful. I learned a lot about the Syrian regime and the transition now, and a lot of different topics. I'm sure audience had a lot of takeaways as well.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure to have a conversation.
Thank you, Shivam. Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
We at DOAP are working really hard to take this podcast to the next level. Our guests are going to get even better. our production quality is going to get even better, and hopefully, I'm going to get even better too. Most importantly, we are committed to being consistent and continue to do what we love the most. Until then, keep reimagining yourself and know that the power of change lies within you. Jai Hind.